Hey, Heather, how are you? Welcome to the Anthony Sabatino Show.
Thank you. So good to be here. Nice to see you again, Anthony.
Yes, nice to see you again. I'm really excited to have the listeners here and the viewers to kind of get a grip on, what you do. And obviously, we have a pretty close connection in the legal field. So I'm really excited to kind of let that come to light a little bit. If you could, why don't you tell everybody a little bit about what you do, your story, a little bit of context for everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. So, my name is Heather Campbell. I am an attorney and legal coach based here in Seattle, Washington. I support information entrepreneurs throughout the US and around the world. And information entrepreneurs, that's my definition of my clients. They are coaches, consultants, experts, speakers, authors, basically folks that are building mostly personal brands, but based around expertise, a body of work that they've created that they really deliver to the world through a variety of services, a variety of ways. And from the standpoint of business and law, they usually have quite a bit going on in their businesses, and they have to really learn what it takes to treat their business like a business and protect, things from intellectual property, their online business. Like they ironically have a lot of the same issues that larger businesses have. They just have to address them on their own scale. So I've been practicing law for 20 years actually, and midway through my career, I just really decided that the traditional legal world did not serve my desired clients in the way that they should be served. And so I set about actually to create a whole second business designed specifically to serve the needs of those information entrepreneurs, which I've done. So it's been a really fun journey. The short version of my personal story is that I was raised by an entrepreneur as a dad, lost my mom young. She passed away during my law school experience. And that really shaped my willingness to do other people's work and instead to really pursue what I wanted to do, because so I'll turn 45 here next month. And that was the year that she was diagnosed with glioblastoma. So it's, when I think about somebody passing away and leaving 6 kids, and, at the time my youngest siblings were like in middle school, it was devastating. It definitely shaped the way that I thought about life, the way that I thought about entrepreneurship, the way that I thought about, any of us that buy into the myth, if you will, thinking like, oh, we have the time to figure it out. We have the time to do the more important stuff later. No. So, right. So I'm on a mission to support world changing entrepreneurs with their business building path, with their business growth, and do it in a way that makes sense for them, where they have the legal support in place. My vision for the world is that small businesses, are the future and do change the world and are changing the world right now. And they should have the support that they need to do that.
I completely agree. It's funny. So, we got connected a little while ago. And one of the things that we even said on our first call was what you just mentioned there was, all these small businesses, they struggle with all the same things in many different ways than a lot of these larger businesses struggle with. And I tend to say that now to every one of my clients. And it's funny, I kind of learned that from you. And it really hits home for a lot of small businesses because they're in such a state of confusion a lot of times of what to do next. It is even what they're doing right now the right thing. And sometimes just to hear that, larger businesses, sometimes the ones that they even revere, are struggling with the same things, maybe with just bigger or scarier numbers. So that really hits home, and I'm sure it will for a lot of people. So one of the things that I really want to touch on, because I know we've talked about it, and I really think it's important and can bring a lot of value to everybody. So the 5-bucket framework, right, that I would love to kind of dig into a little bit with you, see what we can clarify from that, and really kind of dig deep on it if you could.
Totally. I love that. So this was a framework that I developed actually in response to what you just talked about, the confusion of being a small business and an entrepreneur, trying to build a business, is that there is no team initially, right? There are no other people to help figure this out. It's not like small businesses have, built in in-house legal counsel or built in, tech support or any of this stuff, unless somebody comes to their business with those skills. And so, small businesses really have to scrap. They have to scrap and fight in order to build what it is that they're trying to build. And what I found is that most potential clients, most small businesses, most entrepreneurs that I intersect with, they've got like pieces of the puzzle figured out, including in regards to their legal needs, but they don't have the whole map. They don't have somebody on their team that can sit them down and say, here's what you're looking at. Here's what your needs are from a legal perspective. Like there is a straightforward way to do this. And so actually just develop that as a teaching point where I could say, here's the map, and give that away and help people figure out before they even hire legal support, give them the empowerment that they need to actually make those decisions with confidence. Because the other thing that I hate is people, kind of wandering around in the marketplace for legal services and thinking like, I think this is what I need. This is what my business coach told me that I need, or this is what my friend in business told me that I need. So I'm going to do that. Like, I want them to have the whole puzzle. I want them to understand where they are on the map. So they go, oh, I'm really clear that this is the next step of my journey and that I need to do this for my business because I understand what the map is and I understand where I'm at. And that place of empowerment for any of our business decisions is such a better place to be. So that's the quick introduction to the 5-bucket framework for legal protection. And let's be clear that whether you are a client of mine that's making millions of dollars or you are somebody who is just starting out, these are the same buckets that I cover for both levels of client, right? They and oftentimes people, even the businesses that are established, quote unquote, established in the space that I serve, often still have skipped some of their legal needs or skipped building some of that legal foundation. And so many times, we're helping to fill in the gaps on a foundation of a business that could be in the multi-million-dollar range, right? Which is a decent range to be in if you are a small business owner, if you are an online entrepreneur. So I don't beat people up. I meet them where they are. We do an assessment. We look at where they're at, but I always cover these 5 buckets in my client consultations in the client journey. So the quick overview, and if you're listening, I would invite you to put some notes down. The reason being is that people often have to hear this a few times. Like it's like most other topics, if it's not your primary area of expertise, right? You might have to think about it. You might have to percolate on it a little bit and decide what feels like the right fit for you and where to start. But there is kind of an order to it. So the very first bucket that I usually start, with any client on is business structure, right? And we're talking about legal entity, right? You have filed something with your Secretary of State that actually creates a structure around your business. And that could vary, like what type of structure it is, but a lot of people, most small businesses actually in the United States, 60% remain sole proprietors. And a sole proprietor is where you might come up with a trade name. It's also called a DBA, right? So, let's pretend you're a plumber, right? Anthony's Plumbing or whatever. You might come up with a DBA, but it's not the same as going to your Secretary of State and actually creating an LLC, creating a C corporation. And the legal entity is what tells the IRS, tells the government, our court system, even your clients, my business is over here, contained in this legal structure. My personal life is over here, right? So it is the only thing, it's the only tool available to really separate out your business liability from your personal life. And so when you do that, when you take the step of setting up a formal business entity, you have basically limited your liability to the money you put into that business, into funding that business. So if you're somebody that has personal bank accounts, or you own your home, or your spouse has bank accounts or assets or retirement or whatever, right? And a lot of people get this wrong, especially in this space, right? In the online world, small business world, they think like, oh, they minimize, right? What they do is they think like, these other rules don't apply to me because I'm so little,
Right.
right? Let's be clear that 99.9% of all businesses in the United States are small businesses. We are the marketplace. Like, don't minimize just because you feel small or you feel like a little fish in a big pond. Yes, and the rules apply to you. The rules of the road still apply to your business, right? So coaches, consultants, people working even out of home offices, whatever, thinking like, oh, I don't have liability because of the nature of my work. It's just not true. So that bucket number one is really important. If people are listening and are still a sole proprietor, I would ask you, how serious are you about your business? And how serious are you about the assets in your personal life right now? Right? If somebody comes to me and they're like, you know, not to talk about age, but let's pretend they're fresh out of college. They've never had a real job. They don't have savings. They really don't have any assets in their life. That's a completely different conversation than somebody who's coming to me in their mid 30s or mid 40s, and they've already had something of a career and they're investing into their business and they're really going to create something that they will love to spend time in and do transformational work in, right? Yeah. Different conversation. That the second example, they've probably developed some personal assets in their life by that point. So yeah, that's the quick overview of the first bucket. Let's keep in mind that we could spend hours in that bucket talking about, you know, strategies around what entity you choose and all of this stuff. But that's really an assessment that's best done with the support of an accountant, somebody who knows your financial scenario, because the way that we choose a legal entity that is going to be a fit for your scenario has to do both with your long-term business plan, as well as whether or not, for example, you're optimizing for tax strategy. Somebody who's optimizing for tax strategy, right? You are going to want tax advantages. You are going to want to do things that save you money. It's a very different plan than somebody who's optimizing, say, to build a business or a franchise that they plan to sell, right? You optimize that business for profits, different tax strategy. So, you know, the way that you decide on even your legal entity has a lot to do with your long-term plans. And so that's best, that decision is best made with the help of an accountant or a CPA who really knows your financial scenario, and legal counsel that can help you make an honest assessment of your business and your business goals.
I love that. I love that. And so even based on tax advantage, I think it's important to bring this up to some people. So when we think about tax advantage over, you know, focusing on profit, one of the biggest things that, you know, I talk about a lot, not as a, you know, accountant professional, but just, I think as general education, the differences between, you know, classifying as an S corp, right? I think that sometimes can be beneficial for some and can be a big mistake for others. And I think just educating enough on when it's the right time, if it's the right time for your business model, any of that is important to talk about, because I know a lot of people push these idealistic things to do, right? But then kind of like you mentioned, you know, it really is unique. It really is specific. So that's awesome. I am curious, you know, before we even continue through more buckets here, as a smaller business, right? Because I know a lot of the listeners here and viewers are absolutely in that realm. Would you say there's some major, if you want to give an example, that'd be great too, of a different strategy you might give outside of taxes for a small business when it comes down to structures, if you're maybe someone who's getting funding or someone who's exploding a business, you know, coming out millions of dollars at the gate, as opposed to somebody who's kind of bootstrapping it. Does that make sense?
Totally. Yeah. So the vast majority of my clients are self-funded for the most part, meaning that they're building what's called a lifestyle business. And that's not used in a derogatory way. It's meant to be a business that sustains their lifestyle, right? Pays their bills, helps them, you know, create some personal assets, but they're not creating a startup that they're going to spin off in 5 years and make $100 million at or more, right? Sure. So most of my clients don't fall in the startup side. Reason being is I support very mission-driven, heart-centered entrepreneurs who largely live in the space of coaching, consulting, educating, right? They want to transform lives. Like they are the person doing the work, or they may be building team. They might have some team and other coaches or people in their business helping them deliver the services. But by and large, they want to do the work that they love, right? And they need a mechanism for doing that. And so entrepreneurship becomes the path. Now, on the other side, you've got startups, right? So, and this is a very different kind of a business start. This is somebody who is intent on getting funding, who is looking for outside investors, and they might self-fund at first, right? So let's be clear that a lot of startups are bootstrapped, and people are scraping money out of their own bank accounts or from friends and family or wherever they can get it to get things rolling. But the intention of a startup is to grow big, is to become a, many multi-million dollar business. That's not where most of my clients live. If you're on the startup path, yes, there's a very different path from the standpoint of how you begin a business like that. Like you're going to be a C corporation. There's just, you might start. So let's be clear that some small businesses that are startups do sometimes start as an LLC, but it's still a very different kind of LLC. You have to have certain things in the formation paperwork. You have to do things the right way that allow you to eventually, hopefully sooner than later, transition to that Delaware C Corp, where then boom, you are structured appropriately. You can be available and, document and paperwork wise, look the way that you need to look to funders who will then fund your business, right? So very different path. Was that helpful?
Yeah, I think so. And so I think you kind of touched on it there a little bit, because I'm sure a lot of the times contracts play such a large role, right, in setting things up, both, when we're doing actual business with the client, but, coming from a coaching, consulting, heart-centered type business perspective, so much of the time we're working human to human, right? And even if you're going B2B, all those businesses are ran by human beings, right? So a lot of times you're working on a human to human element, and contracts play such a big role. And, you've made a slew of contracts for me that I think absolutely set me up and geared me up in a way that makes me feel confident actually doing the work that is, actually building the business, right? And actually helps people and other businesses. If you could speak a little bit too, because I think I'm even just curious in an expanded way, some maybe black sheep or like minute level advantages to contracts outside of just, making sure you're protected.
Totally. So contracts is bucket number 2, right? So bucket number 1 is business entity. Contracts is bucket number 2. And you're absolutely right. This is where I spend a lot of time with my clients. The reason being, if you think about, and I'm a very visual person, so I tend to do, visual descriptions of the way that I think about business, but think about your business like a piece of machinery, right? So most of the folks that I'm serving, they have an online presence. They have a variety of ways that they will publish information for free, right? You and I are on a podcast right now. And so you are creating content that you push out into the world. You could turn this into an article. You could turn it into a blog post, right? You could separately be writing articles and creating blog posts, and, even through your social media, be positioning yourself as an expert. And the way that we do that is publish loads of information, right? And so all of these ways that we interact with the world, interact with our clients, with our potential clients, and then you get to the point of actually offering services, right? You've got your client services agreements for various scenarios, whether it's, one-on-one client work, workshops, group work, live events, right? There's all of these ways that, again, people provide their services. And then, ways that we grow and evolve our business, joint venture partnerships, affiliate programs, collaborations, masterminds, right? All of these are phenomenal ways to grow our business and expose our IP and put our business at risk, right? So the reason the contracts bucket is so big is if you literally think of your business like a piece of machinery with all these moving parts, right? The first bucket, your legal entity, think of as your foundation. So literally picture a big solid foundation, and then picture this big piece of machinery on it with like nuts and bolts and gears and all these moving parts. your contracts protect that machinery, the day-to-day workings of your business. So even when you hire help, like let's say you hire an independent contractor as a VA, or you hire your first employee, or the ways that we build teams, like all of that should be covered by contracts as well. And so basically there's not anything that we can do in our business that probably shouldn't have a contract in place to cover that exchange of value. If there's an exchange of value, you need an understanding around what that is. And so for people just starting off, especially if they're newer in their career, they can be a little uncomfortable, like putting a contract in a client's face, because they're just new to business, right? For people that are more seasoned, you just realize this is a part of doing business, and the clarity that comes with a contract that is done right. Let's be clear that contracts can be done very wrong. A contract that is done right is supportive of the relationship. It's not just about, quote unquote, trying to create a bulletproof business. And let's be clear that you can't do that. Right. It is about creating an environment where there's clarity and where you say, I value the relationship, and this contract will help the relationship, because it absolutely does. Let's look at scenario A, where there's no contract and something goes sideways, as things inevitably do when humans are involved. And scenario B, where you have a contract in place, right? Scenario A, which I end up with lots of clients at my door in scenario A, where they had some verbal understanding, or they launched their first program and they didn't have terms in place, or whatever. You end up with somebody who's irrational or irresponsible, or just the wrong fit for your business inside of your services. And you are left negotiating with that irrational, irresponsible person, right? And that can be a really long uphill battle and really drain a lot of energy from your business, from you as a person who loves to provide a certain service in the world, right? Just out of, an example the other day is one of my clients who is a coach, essentially, educator and coach in the online space, ended up with a gal who, hired him for his services, and really truthfully has a lot of personality problems, right? And $30,000 later, they're both pretty unhappy. And now they've got to unwind this scenario, and contracts can support you in that, or they can make it very, very challenging if you don't have them, or you do them wrong, right? So scenario B, where you have clarity, you have a solid contract, and what makes a good contract is that it's clear, that both parties understand it, and that it's accurate. One of the biggest problems that I see in the world of contracts is people use a contract that's not tailored to their business. It's not accurate, doesn't reflect all the details that it needs, or has them wrong, right? And then you've got this confusion around the scenario that is not helped by the contract. When you have a clear contract, both parties are on board. It says what it is intends to say. It means what it is intended to mean. Coming out the other side of a dispute is so much easier. You look to the language of the contract. You say, oh, yeah. So for example, a website designer years ago that came to me, and we put a solid contract in place for him. After that, he came back and he was like, my clients have stopped jerking me around. And if there's any additional work that gets done, they now know the rates for that additional work. We've defined the scope in such a way that all of these scope creep problems that he had before, and this can happen in any line of creative services, or services where generally the scope is not well defined, right? Then it's not clear, and the client comes back to you, well, what about this? Well, what about this? And suddenly your scope has ballooned way beyond what you anticipated, right? Defining that scope and having a contract that does that well can literally save you your business, because there's only so many times that you can let scope creep get away from you before you probably hate what you're doing, frustrated with your clients, frustrated about your business model, right? And so it really, the visual for what contracts do for your business and for your services when there are issues. And let's be clear that business is a numbers game. There will be issues for you if you're in business. it's like removing the hurdles on, on the racetrack. Like
Yeah.
you still might trip and fall, you still might, but you're not gonna, it's gonna clear some of the hurdles where getting out of those problems becomes a lot easier because you've got clarity and you can go back to the contract and say, oh yeah, here's what's gonna happen. We agreed. And the other reason, the final point I'll put in this is that, we can have really good memories as humans. Like I pride myself in like remembering crazy details from things that happened many, many years ago. But we can still be wrong. The reality is any of us can be wrong on any given point, because the other thing that our brains do very, very well is fill in the gap. And there are lots of gaps. And it's a little bit like playing the game of telephone.
Yeah.
In business, we have lots of opportunity for the game of telephone to end up the way that it usually ends up, which is that people misremember, they mishear something. And, you don't want to be left without the benefit of a clear contract that helps support the relationship in resolving those little bumps.
I love that. And so funny that you mentioned that about how our ability to fill in the gaps. So I say something to my clients that I think is really interesting where, and for people who are watching or get this, if you're listening, just imagine me drawing with my finger about 3/4 of a circle. So I'll draw about 3/4 of a circle. And to most people, what that looks like is it's a circle, like you're almost there, right? But we fill in that extra quarter of a gap to call it a circle, and then develop all the associations with what our circle is based on not quite a circle. So that filling in the gaps process is so prevalent. So I can understand that completely. What's even more interesting, to piggyback off of what you said regarding, different things that can go wrong from contracts, right, is just the overall, I guess, epitome of what failure can bring in business, right? Going through those failures, experiencing them, right, to know what it feels like to then be able to adapt and pivot better. Could you give maybe some examples, maybe even you personally in your business, or ones that you've worked with the other businesses that have really experienced some failure that maybe, listeners here can learn from, right? Because a lot of times we get to learn from others, and I kind of call it the dummy tax, right? Like we don't want to pay that same tax somebody else paid if we can, choose otherwise. Anything you can maybe bring to the table that might help somebody listening to not make the same mistake?
Totally. And then another follow-up point on that, I like the concept of the dummy tax, right? Anytime we can learn from other people's situations, we should definitely try to do that. And we will still have hard situations in our own businesses that inform our business practices, our business policies, the way that we offer our services going forward. And so it's a little bit of a double-edged sword where we try to avoid those things, and those things will make our business stronger when they happen, because we come out the other side with so much more clarity. So, it's like, even in my own business, I went through a string of clients that were sending me documents that I couldn't access because they were in like Pages or some format that as an attorney, I work in Word, like Microsoft Word all day long, right? Google Docs. I mean, because they can translate, that's it. Like, don't send me a document in Pages, because I don't want to bill you $300 an hour to go try to fix that or undo it or whatever. And so there's several formats where, and I literally put that into my engagement letter. Like, these are the formats that I need documentation in if you're going to have me review a contract. Because the other thing about the way that I work is, like, I will set aside some work to do, some time on my schedule to do specific client work. And literally, I won't look at what they sent me until I'm sitting down to do the work. And so what I don't want to have happen is, like, okay, I've set aside an hour to do this client, contract review or whatever, and then spend that whole hour just trying to get a document that will open. Right. So it's little things like that, that even when they're frustrating, they will help your business moving forward. So let's be clear that we cannot avoid all the, the potholes in the road. We need some of those potholes to actually improve our business. And just by very nature of being in business, we will get some of those potholes. Now, we want to avoid the big ones, right? We don't really want to, drive off a cliff. And so that's where, definitely getting the right things done in the right order can literally save your business, right? And that's where things like, if you've got a core service that you're offering, like I spoke with a guy the other day and he's on track, he's making like $40,000 a month. And I said, okay, talk to me about the revenue streams in your business and where the money's coming from, right? How are you making the money? What are the different sources or offerings or services that, are providing this income? Like 98% of it is one-on-one coaching, right? And I was like, okay, so I'm clear that we need to start by examining your one-on-one client services agreement, right?
Definitely.
Website comes later. Like website is primary for most people that I serve based on how they're running their business. For him, he was generating a lot of income just on one-on-one client work, right? So we needed to start there. So that's what I'm talking about, where the path is not that hard when you have a little help looking at where the priorities should be in your business. Start by protecting your moneymaker, right? And, because when it goes wrong, and I'll walk you through a couple scenarios where it's gone wrong for clients that will be educational, right? So for example, I had one client that, her primary offering was group services, right? Group coaching. And while she had an agreement, it was one that she kind of pieced together from who knows, right? Multiple places, business coach, internet, whatever. And then she got a problem client in one of her group programs. And this client wanted to run around and tell everybody else like, oh, isn't this program terrible? Don't you hate it? We should all be asking for refunds. The other people didn't hate it, but they started to get really irritated with her because she wouldn't stop. So she had this problem person inside of her group programs that wouldn't stop doing this. But guess what? Her contract didn't allow her the right to remove her from her services.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
There was no clause saying if you're not a fit for the services, I can remove you. And, if there's any liability, which, in some circumstances there may be, in some circumstances there may not be for removing a person, it will be limited to the price of the program, right? Yeah. Something as simple as that, like a reservation clause that allows somebody to take somebody out of a group program and not have it sink the experience for everybody else, is really important. A small thing, but really important. She had spent months negotiating with this unreasonable person, right? Trying to get her out of the program. And no, she just wanted to be a stinker and stay in the program and ruin it for everybody else. So this is where I'm saying, business is a numbers game. Sometimes we just end up with people that should not be in our services that end up in our services. And you need to have the safeguards in place, given what you do, that allow you not to be jerked around, by somebody who just should not be your client.
That makes so much sense. And the amount of people that I think undervalue what this conversation brings in the sense that legally you can protect yourself and steer your ship, I guess, in that sense, in such a better direction than if you kind of just let the sails up and let it go wherever it's supposed to go. You can really kind of pave your way in a way that will speak to your ambitions, right? And I think that is extremely powerful because so many speaks and, they want such a big game and they have such large goals. And a lot of times our actions very rarely ever match up to that. And this is a great way to foundationally, I feel, do that. Would you agree?
Yeah. And to your point about, our actions not matching up with it, it's part of it's just the challenge of building a business. Part of it is that people get so focused on, I call it like waxing the outside of the vehicle. Sure. Like they haven't really looked at the engine. They haven't figured out like what's missing on the inside. And, part of it is you don't know what you need on the inside until you're sometimes in the process of building the thing, right? So I'm clear that there's not always like an obvious, like do the legal first if you haven't been in business long enough to even know what you're offering, what your positioning is in the marketplace. So there's some of that needs to happen. And if you're serious about what you are building, so this is a little bit, there is a difference between people who are like, oh, I'm going to try this as a hobby. Like I've got enough money in career number one or in my savings account. I don't need to really be serious about it. It's a very different person than the folks usually who show up to get legal support, to build the thing that is really in their heart. Right. And mostly I work almost exclusively with the second type of person because the other people are not showing up for legal support. But if you are serious about your business, and you're like, what gaps do I have? Like now is the time to figure out what gaps you have, right? If you're still not clear that business is for you, fine, futz around, like learn lessons the hard way, whatever. You're probably not somebody that's going to show up at my door. But if you're like, you know what, I'm building the thing that I know I'm here to build, I'm doing the thing that's going to allow me to do really meaningful work in the world. Yeah, you want to slow down for a second before you launch new things into the world, before you launch your signature course or program, before you like, hit publish on like the website that just took you a year and a half to build. Like protect it before you launch. Do that, because if you're the kind of person that wants to plan for where you're going, you don't do it after the fact.
No, that's a great point. And so, I looked at your website. Obviously, we've done a lot of work together, and doing this entire conversation, I think, is so valuable, and you can learn so much from it. And I know you've had the opportunity to work with some pretty influential people, right? Lewis Hose, for example, Damon John. These are some pretty, up there kind of people. Could you give any like insider look at maybe what that was like collaborating, maybe doing some work with them? And because I think everybody listening here, we all kind of revere them. We always kind of look up at them in some entrepreneurial sense. So having someone who, has worked with them in a very close manner, I think it can be beneficial.
Yeah, so I'm really, really careful about what I will say about clients, right? I appreciate and enjoy all my clients. And I also built my business because I believe that while many people are striving to build businesses that look like those businesses, right? We have to start where we are. And businesses need support earlier than that phase of business, right? So you need support in the early building phase. And again, this gets back to the point of like plan for where you're going. I love supporting people at that level of business. I love supporting people who are just launching their business like right out of the gates. They're on the earlier part of the journey, which is partly why I've developed my own business to have both some built-in like automated do-it-yourself type of supports, as well as some custom, really high-end, hands-on, like let's be strategic and really dig into your business level of support, right? So it's just different levels of clients. But what I would say is that you have to start from where you are. Nobody gets to any level of business without doing the work. And part of the reason why I even launched my own podcast, Guts, Grit, and Great Business, is I feel like there are a lot of people who really, really badly want to buy into the idea that you can, get online, launch a business, and in a couple years, skyrocket to the top of the industry. No, like just no, that's not how it works. Even for people who appear to have done that, right? When you really learn their stories, you learn what it took for them to build that. And it was a lot of grind. It was a lot. And not that I need to like be one more person to glorify the grind. That's not it at all. I really, we all have our own struggles. For some of us, it's that we grind too hard, right? We work really hard in our businesses. For others of us, it's a different struggle. But the reality is that if you're in business of any kind, I really invite you to take a long-term approach to what it is that you want to create in the world. And just remember, like connect back to your big why, right? It doesn't really matter the size of business that you're building. Building a business is tough. It's freaking hard. Takes all kinds of chops and like ability to make decisions and get the right people in place at the right time and the right resources, right? But take a long-term approach to it and be in the conversation with people that you respect, that hold the same values that you hold, that are able to help you bring those values into your business and model those values through the work that you do, right? I could wax really philosophical and big on this point, but I am a really big believer that entrepreneurship in general is the path to express some of our greatest good in the world. And so, I really would invite people to take a long-term approach to their business. It's totally fine to admire people like that. Like when you look from the outside at their businesses and you see what can be done and what can be achieved in the small business space, it's phenomenal what some people have created. And make sure that you're staying grounded in reality, that you are looking at your business with support, right? Get support and be taking the right next step. It's all about the right next step for you at this time. And this is the other thing about the online space. And I've had conversations with other people about it. one of the hard things, because we all make decisions differently. Like for me, I'm very intuitive. I have a clear yes and a clear no kind of a hit. Like if I'm looking at something and I'm deciding like, do I need this for my business? It's a clear yes or clear no. It's not like there's any wishy-washiness going on. But some people really struggle with that. You go to industry events, you hear from an expert or coach. I think it can be really challenging for people at different stages of business building not to fall prey to like, oh, I'm just going to outsource my own business leadership to another expert, right? They're not saying that out loud, but it's what they're doing internally. Like, oh, I'm just going to hire this coach and it'll fix everything, or it'll be the answer. Like, no, let's be clear that you are responsible for leading your business, making decisions for your business. And it's on all of us as entrepreneurs and business builders ourselves to decide what is it that we need and to go find that. And to go find that in the right consultant or expert or support for our business, right? Because, I mean, this is just one small example, but let's talk about what can happen when somebody, for example, hires the wrong accountant. There are, and this is not to bash on accountants, but the number of times I have seen entrepreneurs or small businesses, especially in the early phase of business or the first handful of years, they're not creating the income yet that is making them a very sustainable business, right? But they're going to get the advice from most accountants like, oh yeah, you don't need to incorporate. You don't need to create an LLC, right? You're not there yet. I disagree. And part of it is because that accountant is looking at it primarily from the standpoint of, do you have the money to make this decision? As business builders, that's not how we need to be making decisions. We need to be making decisions from the standpoint of, what am I trying to build? What does it take to get there? I'm not planning for where I'm at right now. If we do that, we never move, right? I'm planning for where I'm going. How do I do that? And you need to put support professionals and coaches and consultants, whatever you need in place to help you walk that path. But if you choose the wrong person, and you outsource your own business leadership to an expert or to somebody else, it can really have terrible impact on your business.
It absolutely can. I think you're so right.
Yeah. So that's also the cautionary tale about looking at certain people that have established certain levels of business and thinking like, oh, I just need to do what they say or whatever. Like, no, you are on your own business building path. Nobody knows your strengths, your weaknesses, your capabilities, right? Your desire, what's really in your heart better than you. You have to decide and then go find the puzzle pieces that you plug in to help you get there.
I think you're so right. And that level of accountability is extremely tough to embody, especially in the beginning, right? We go through so many challenges that steer us in different directions that many times we lose that sense of what our strengths and weaknesses actually are, which then obviously deploys the, I guess the strength to be able to do that, right? And steer it all the way through. That makes so much sense. But listen, Heather, this has been absolutely amazing. I'm so excited that we got to have this conversation and, get so much information out of this that I think can help in an area specifically that I think so many business owners are underutilizing and just uneducated to the point where they can be. So just understanding the tip of the iceberg here, I think can really push people to a point that can steer them in a path that they can grow to and grow into and really evolve to the places that they want to go to.
Yeah, well, and
yeah, go ahead.
Really quick, I like to remind people, because some people are going to be like, oh, we only covered the first 2 buckets and I'm already feeling overwhelmed, right?
Yeah.
Let's be clear that there's 3 more buckets, and I'll name them quickly, but if I'm able to, can I also give your audience a resource where they can go get the rest of that information? Right. So bucket number 3 is business insurance. Bucket number 4 is having an intellectual property protection plan in place. So this is all about understanding your IP and how to protect it. Bucket number 5 is having a dispute resolution plan. Also, you could call it a communication plan for your business, right? So I do teaching and have resources in all of those buckets, but you're going to have to hear this a few times to start to adopt this as the map for your business, right? For people that are like, oh, I need to really wrap my head around legal. 1, take some time, but 2, you can do it. It's just like anything else you have to learn in business, whether it's marketing or sales or information technology related to your business. you can learn some basic, some legal basics, some essential legal chops that will serve you very well with the help of somebody who understands your business, right? So I tell people it's my job to deliver the golden nuggets. You don't need a law degree, but you do need to understand some basics. And so if people are interested in that, I would invite them to actually go through my legal basics boot camp. Can I share a link for that?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, so you can find that at legalwebsitewarrior.com/legal basics bootcamp. And that's just a little mini video series. I think it pushes out like one video a day. You'll get an email reminder to go log in, and it's like 5 minutes. It's going to walk you through each of those buckets and also give you some additional resources to kind of check on in your business to find out, like, do you have these in place? If not, here's what might help.
I love that. I couldn't recommend that more. I've done it myself, so I can speak to it. So yeah, that's amazing. What's the best way for people to reach out to you? Because I'm sure people are definitely intrigued and would love to probably contact you personally.
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously you can get to me through my website, legalwebsitewarrior.com. There's loads of resources there. There's a contact page there. You're welcome to email me, right? So just heather@legalwebsitewarrior.com. I'm also on LinkedIn. So for folks that like to do online connecting, LinkedIn is my favorite place. It's where I find people who are really serious about, building a business and creating what they're here to create in the world. So of all the social networks, that's my preference. But yeah, and of course, back to the earlier conversation about guts, grit, and great business, you can also pop over and join me on my podcast there. We've got loads of phenomenal entrepreneurs that share, literally life-changing stories and tips and information. So it's one of my very favorite places to spend time for sure.
I love it. It's a great podcast. Well,
thank you.
Of course. Well, everybody, please go check out Heather. She does some amazing work. She has done amazing work for me personally, so I can speak to it on a personal level as well as a business level. Please go check her out. She has amazing content as well. And please go check out her podcast. Amazing stuff you're bringing to the world. Thank you so much, Heather, for being on the show.
Thank you, Anthony. I appreciate you. So happy to be able to support you.
Of course. Of course. Thanks so much.
Took a shot in the dark to make my own lane. I think that I'm better going my own way, so I didn't. Now I'm on my own, yeah, I'm on my way. Keep my head up till I find my place, yeah, I'm on my